and that's why this communication is so critically important now and stays important and maybe becomes even more important as we go through that regulatory process. But we are confident that, we will be able to work our way through that process in a way that will achieve an approval of the merger at the end of the day. Next question coming from Indianapolis. I probably should ask all my merger advisors and helpers to come down here and bail me out when I get out of bounds.
Good morning from Indianapolis.
Good morning.
Charlie Gavan. Question here is, what will happen to the ESOP unallocated stock, and how will it be distributed?
Charlie, would you repeat the question for me, please? I got the part about how the unallocated would be distributed. What was the first part of that?
Yes, sir. What will happen to the ESOP unallocated stock, and how will it be distributed?
Pretty straight answer to that is that decision has not yet been made. I think we talked about that a little bit at the last meeting. Clearly, the point of the question is well-founded. I don't know what's the percentage, Tim O'Toole. Can you tell me as to between allocated and unallocated?
2 million is allocated, 7 million are unallocated.
So shares, in terms of shares, we've got about 2 million shares that have been allocated to participants and about 7 million shares that have been unallocated. So it's an important issue because you can tell by the number of shares involved it has some potential significant consequence, but the actual decision about how they would be allocated and what would ultimately happen in the distribution has not yet been made. And when it is, we will. Excuse me?
Or if there'll even be one.
Or if there'll even be a distribution, right? Dearborn.
Dearborn. How sure are we that we can win the countersuit against NS for this frivolous activity?
Well, I guess we don't see it as frivolous, or we would not have filed it. For those of us who had the good fortune or misfortune, and I would, as a sidelight, I will tell you, one of the most painful things I've ever had to go through in my professional career was the 2 days I spent in federal court, and I don't care if I ever have to do that again. So, but that aside, with that having been said, we would not have filed this suit against them if we believed it was frivolous. And for those of us who sat in that courtroom and listened to the opinion of the judge in that case, I think believe that we have a good basis to continue to move that case forward and move it aggressively, and that is our plan. And we didn't file it frivolously. We filed it because we think, in fact, they have behaved in a way that supports the case we have against them. Anything more, Bruce, you would like to? Okay. Pittsburgh.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Levan. This is Mike Peterson. One of the questions we have here is, do the Conrail employees as a group have enough shares or enough votes to make a difference in the December 23rd shareholders meeting?
We don't know specifically how many shares are in the hands of Conrail employees. In terms of actual in their hands, many of those shares are probably registered in what they call street name, and so there's no real good way to track exactly how many shares they are. Shares we can track are the shares that are in the ESOP and in the SECT, which will be voted on the 23rd. Those 9 million shares in the ESOP would represent about 10%. When you said 2 and 7, total of 9, that'd be about 10%. Again, the unallocated, as we've told you, will be voted in the same way that those who choose in the allocated shares vote. They'll vote the same way. That's why the vote of the ESOP is important. A 10% block of shares in those hands is extremely important to us. The only other shares we know about are those which are disclosed in a proxy statement, which are in the hands of officers and directors, which is less than 1% of the stock outstanding. Got a question? Okay, we'll take a question from inside this room. Yeah, very quiet bunch. Sure, Bill.
Have you seen any change in the position of the UP and the BN Santa Fe? The question is, have you seen any change in the position of the UP or the BN Santa Fe on this transaction?
We have not seen any change in position from the UP. That their initial position was to sit on the sidelines and stay out, and we haven't seen anything to the contrary. And the initial reaction and conversations that John Snow and I both had with Rob Krebs would have led us to believe, I think, a similar position. You have now seen, I think, in the press a change in his position that he has an interest in making sure that there is some kind of equality in the two eastern rail networks when this is over, and that he will sit on the sidelines, I guess is the way I would categorize that, as long as he's satisfied that somehow this quote-unquote equality is achieved. One, I don't believe in the necessity of the principle of equality, and I'm not sure that I understand what he means by equality, but I think we may see some change of position from the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, given what Rob has said recently.
The two major blocks of shares, FMR and I think Capital Group was the other one. Are we negotiating with them, and what's their general feeling of which way they're going to vote?
I'll probably maybe ask Tim O'Toole to fill in the details on this. The process, we have been out talking to and listening to our shareholders, and we have been keeping a very close profile of who that shareholder base is. As you know, last Thursday was the record date, and so those are the folks who are going to have the opportunity to vote their shares. I don't know, Tim, yet whether we've gotten the profile. Probably too early to get an exact profile or even an estimate of what that December 5th profile, or do you have a look at the?
Well, the Cap Guardian and Fidelity remain our two largest shareholders. We have talked with both of them, but you have to understand that these large institutions also own CSX shares, they own Norfolk Southern shares, and so for them it's kind of a three-dimensional decision. They don't commit themselves, they just ask for information, and they pretty much kept their own counsel so far because they're waiting for the best deal. And so we just keep in contact with them, keep supplying them with information, and I think they're waiting till they get much closer to the December 23rd date before they'll make their positions known.
Yeah, I guess I'll take the opportunity. This is a dynamic process, and so dynamic that the NS put out a press release yesterday, which I first saw this morning, which we really haven't had a chance to really digest, I'm sure what it means or what its implications are, but that's one piece of information. If we haven't gotten out to everybody, we ought to get it out just in terms of what they've said, but the essence of what they've said is that they're really not in a position to want to deal with either the CSX or Conrail unless there's a commitment that the transaction would be $110 all cash and in a trust. And so we will obviously now have to take a look at what that means. And while we're taking a look at what that means, obviously the other very important folks here who are going to be looking to see what that implies are going to be Conrail shareholders, and that'll be just another piece of information that's out there that may influence Conrail shareholders and how they may vote on the 23rd. So it's a very dynamic situation.
I think it might be helpful, Craig or Mr. Levan, if you could summarize exactly what is the deadline for filing the vote here and for voting our shares. And also, we've received so many different pieces of paper that it might be good to summarize exactly what pieces of paper.
Okay, well, as to the timing and as to the pieces of paper other than the gold card my son's going to get, and oh, by the way, Joe, you can still call me Dave. That's, I wouldn't take that as a case of disrespect from any of you. So please feel free and comfortable in calling me by my first name. But Craig, you want to talk about the pieces of paper again in terms of the white card, green card, and the timing? Obviously, from the standpoint of voting, the sooner the better. But your question was when the deadline is. So I think the deadline is for the shareholders meeting to vote 23rd, but to vote effectively by proxy and have that get in. I don't know what we think the actual timing ought to be to make certain that.
I'm not sure about is there a separate deadline for Fidelity? Cheryl Cook's not here, I believe. Do you know what that is?
I think it's the 19th.
There is a different deadline for Fidelity, which is somewhat earlier. You should read your materials. We think it's the 19th. Bim?
So Craig, the proxy tabulator will be tabulating votes right up to the time of the meeting. I mean, they will be faxing material back and forth between the office in Pittsburgh and also the Academy of Music. So obviously it's best to get the proxy cards in as soon as you possibly can.
It's best to vote early.
And often, that's right.
Often doesn't hurt as long as you keep the gold card where it belongs here. Again, as I said earlier, the last card you vote is the one that will count. But you should be conscious as you read your material that someone said that the Fidelity deadline is earlier than the 23rd, so you will have to have that card in. Perhaps it's the 19th, somebody suggested. Once again, though, if you own Conrail common stock, you should have received a white card. You may receive more than one of these cards. The Fidelity card is the green one. That represents the ESOP. The ESOP vote is extremely important because the way you vote your allocated shares will be voted, the unallocated shares, the 7 million, will be voted in proportion to the way ESOP holders vote their allocated shares. So that's a very powerful vote. And once again, the important thing to understand about the gold card is if you're for this transaction between Conrail and CSX, that anything you do with that card will negate anything you do on the white card. If you're for this transaction, it's obviously best to do nothing with that card. That's always easy to do. Just ignore it. Yes?
Craig, you might anticipate a point of clarification for people. In the first wave of this, the first tender, CSX made a move after its first tender, but didn't send out a second wave of papers until quite late. You might talk about, in terms of voting early and voting often, that if there's a later move, your first vote will automatically count for the second tender. I mean, if there's another move by CSX. If I've got that right. I wouldn't want people to sit, because there's been speculation in the press that CSX might make another move. Some people might not be sending in their tender materials. I think it's clear that if you want to vote for CSX, you should vote now, and if there's a move, that will count. It'll pick that up.
Well, I think if there's a clarification here, I think we got to make sure that we don't confuse that what we're asking for is a proxy vote on this opt-out provision, and that then whether you elect to tender or not to tender into the second CSX tender offers, we're going to require a separate action to be taken. These are two separate events. The one we've been talking about this morning is the importance of, first and foremost, getting the right answer at the Conrail shareholders meeting. So we've been talking about the proxy material to vote for the meeting on the 23rd. Now you've got a CSX second tender out there saying, listen, if you want to tender into CSX, who subject to the right vote here on the shareholders, are going to tender to get another 20.1% of Conrail's shares at $110. That would be potentially subject to a further change of the merger consideration by the CSX, and I think that's a separate issue, and maybe maybe Bruce, you want to say some more in clarifying as to between what happens in the tender situation as opposed to what's happening here with the shareholders vote. I want to make sure there's no confusion as to between these two separate issues.
Yeah, there was a question here as to what we can expect to get in the mail. The proxy materials for the shareholders meeting that contain these white cards will be coming from Conrail. The proxy materials that you get in connection with the ESOP that contain the green card will be coming with Fidelity and will include Conrail material and a cover letter from Fidelity that says we've been asked by Conrail to send these to you. The second tender offer, by which CSX would propose to acquire a second 20% of Conrail stock, will be coming from CSX, and we'll have a piece of material from Conrail in it, which says yes, we endorse this tender offer. That closes now on the 6th of January. So in your mail very shortly, if you haven't already got it, you'll be getting the material for the shareholders meeting on the 23rd of December and the material for the second CSX tender offer. So there's two different sets of materials here. The white card and the green card are in connection with the shareholders meeting. The second tender will have another one of those long forms which you have to stretch out on your dining room table to fill out like the first tender material that you received.
Okay, we're going to go back to Altoona.
We talked about litigation and our lawsuit against the Norfolk Southern.
Yes.
I was elated to hear that we're being proactive and we're going after him, but what do we plan on gaining out of this? Out of the lawsuit I'm talking about?
Well, ultimately what we have asked for in this litigation is monetary damages. In that what we are asserting in our lawsuit is that they have interfered with a merger agreement between Conrail and CSX, and as a result they have caused us damages, and we are asking to be compensated for those damages, and we're also asking for punitive damages because we believe they did this in a way that would warrant an award of punitive damages. I guess, Bruce, that's what we're asking for. That's what we've asked for in our litigation. The other thing, I guess, that you hope to achieve with that is a signal to all of the parties that we are proactive and that we're just not going to sit here and let this merger be interfered with. And to the extent that gets that message out and causes some folks to consider their past or future behavior as it relates to interfering with this transaction, then that's the other thing you do with litigation, is to send a message. So we're both sending a message with that litigation, but we clearly are filing and seeking monetary compensation for the money that we believe has been spent in dealing with that interference. Bruce, anything else you'd like to add to? Okay, going to Mount Laurel.
What has the customer feedback been like since the original merger announcement?
The question is, you've heard the question, I don't have to repeat it. Customer feedback, I can only speak, I guess, firsthand to customers that I have personally spoken with, and I would say that generally that feedback has gone from neutral to sitting on the sidelines, doing an evaluation, waiting to see what it means to my company, personally, to being positive. I have not come across in any of my conversation customers who have come out with an immediate opposing view. I'm sure there are some out there. John Salmon has been to see the CMA, so maybe I'd ask John to talk a little bit about your sessions with the CMA and any customers you may have spoken with. I'll probably then ask Cynthia to talk about some of the sessions she's had with some of her customers. John, let's go first to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, as Dave said, this is a process and people are collecting information, and what we have seen is the more information you give people in terms of how you're going to file a case and what you're going to do with the competitive situations, the more positive they become. So I think this really right now is there's a lack of information. As Dave said, we've been held back. Norfolk Southern has been on the street, so as we're able to get out, talk to people, tell them how we're going to proceed and what we're going to file, you get, I think, the ability to support and gather support is really growing. So it's really a matter of everybody getting out, and as Dave said, you can't do it with 2 or 3 people. It's going to take all of us to get out, tell the whole story, because there are a lot of really good benefits here for this merger, and we just need to tell the story. And the more the story is told, the more positive reaction you're going to get.